Hello. So my name's Neil Gillingham. I am the grandson to Russell Causley and Carole Packman. So to give you a bit of a brief background to myself, ultimately my grandfather was the first person in legal history to be convicted of murder twice. I've been campaigning now since 2014 for his continued imprisonment until he discloses the whereabouts of my grandmother's remains. I've been highly publicised, and as has the case. And some of you may have watched The Investigator, a British crime story, which is available on Netflix, along with various other documentaries also focused on my upbringing and life to date. I'd encourage you to watch that. The reason why I'm speaking to you ultimately today is because I want to share some of my story in terms of how has my upbringing influenced my thoughts and processes and perceptions of life ultimately. I think one of the things that really provoked me in terms of key life events would probably be the birth of my son. My son was welcomed into this world on the 4th of June last year, and to say that his arrival was a significant moment, it's probably doing him a bit of a disservice, really. It was amazing. I think that you're growing up, becoming a parent, you start to appreciate, you also start to reflect really in terms of how can I be the best possible parent? How can I be the best possible influence to this young life? So that's sort of why I found myself speaking with you guys today, and and I'm hoping that some of my story and some of the things I have to share will resonate with you. Also acts as a bit of a reference point in terms of perhaps some of the things that you're going through and experiencing at the moment, some of the things that I've also experienced, and look, I'm still here, I'm still standing, right? So I've got to be doing something right. In terms of myself, I'm not just a campaigner, I'm not just a disruptor, a legal challenger, so to speak. I'm also someone as well that's a partner, I'm a business leader. I own my own company, I run my own company. I've spent the last 6-7 years in corporate life. So in terms of that side, perhaps even a lot of the business side of things that I've learned, perhaps I can also share with you. And they're things that certainly have helped me, both in terms of my mental health, but also managing, managing and coping, and understanding why perhaps I respond to certain situations the way I do. So in terms of myself, I think that, as I say, my son's arrival was really the key sort of turning point. And not turning point in terms of, things that have changed, stop, start and continue. It's very much just about in terms of where do I want to be in the future, and what sort of platform do I want to provide to my family? And that isn't necessarily about anything other than, I guess, giving your offspring the best possible chances, options. Smart people have options, they have choices in life. So, for me, it's very much about sort of having the things that I didn't have as a child. Stability being one of the sort of the key ones for me, really. I believe that, in terms of when we look back and when I reflect in terms of what I went through, there's certain things I'd never blame my parents for. I think that, no one really teaches you how to be a parent. Your child, any parent out there will tell you, the day that your child arrives, you're not handed an instruction manual. They don't tell you how to do this. So you sort of, you come home, and I'll never forget coming home with my partner. And Mel's been hugely inspirational for me, and hats off to her for being such an amazing mum. But we came home, and we both looked at each other, and we had this little bundle of joy, just so delicate, so precious. And he was just looking back at us like, who the hell are you? And it was like, mate, I'm dad, and this is your mum. And, and our job is to protect you. And our job is to provide for you and care for you and give you the love that you deserve. So, for me, it was so significant. It really was. It was, and even now, sort of, thinking about it, it's quite emotional, really. Because, it's a huge responsibility. It's a huge weight. You can't, it's not like a car, you commit to it and then you think to yourself, well, I can't afford that anymore, I'll sell it. It's, you're in this for life, right? And, this isn't a dog, this isn't that you can rehome, this is your child, it's you, it's your flesh and blood. And, so for me, I think that, the main thing is having gone through so many different subjects throughout my life, whether it be in terms of bullying, whether it be in terms of, murder, crime and justice, as well as business, university schooling. I've been through most of it, and I think that throughout that I've learned an awful lot, and I'm hoping that I can share that with my son, but also I can share it with other people as well, and hopefully others can benefit from my knowledge and wealth of experience. I was always described as a child growing up as I was wise head on young shoulders, massively. I grew up well before my years. So to give you a bit of a sort of a timeline, so people have a mental timeline as they're watching this and watching these series, is ultimately, I was born in 1989, November the 8th, 1989. My mother and father welcomed me into this world. In 1993, my grandfather was investigated and convicted over £1 million life insurance fraud. In 1996, my grandfather, it was discovered that my grandmother had been missing for 11 years. My grandfather was convicted of murder for the first time. If we forward sort of wind from 1998 through to 2003, my grandfather was extremely vocal in terms of what he believed to be his innocence, and how he had been done ultimately he'd been miscarriage of justice. So he had been very, very vocal with that, and his legal team had launched various legal bits to challenge his conviction. And 2004, he was successful. No one could believe it. And, we were back to where we were in 1996. So within 6 months, my life had changed hugely. I'd gone from being a relatively normal kid that had various personal issues, in the background, to suddenly being forced into the limelight and, hitting newspapers at a very, very young age. And my grandfather, I was withdrawn from education. As I say, I was bullied hugely at the time. I was withdrawn from education. We had panic alarms in our house. We had various measures, shall we put in place to protect us as a family. And I struggled hugely. I was 14. It was probably the most challenging period in any teenager's life. Is 13, 14, 15, those tender years where you're really, you're going through a lot of changes emotionally, physically, mentally, in terms of making that adjustment from a child to a teenager, and then from a teenager to an adult. And so, those tender years really, really did impact in terms of how I've transformed into an adult, and, how I perceive the world. And I think that quite a few people will be able to resonate with that, how those changes come about. But, on top of those normal changes that we all go through, I then had some seriously big issues. As I say, 2004, my grandfather was then reconvicted. We're the first family in British legal history to convict someone twice of the same murder with no body. And, my grandmother's now been missing for 35 years. So, from 2004 to 2014, my grandfather, was in prison. And he still is to this very day. But from 2014, he became eligible for parole, and he's been trying to get out. So I've been spending the last 6 years now campaigning. Some of you will be familiar with Helen's Law. That was something which was originally started by Marie McCaw for her daughter, who is sadly similar to our loved one, is still missing. And so Marie, my mother, Linda Jones, and a few other high-profile murder victims all joined forces. And we said that we recognise that something must change, right? So from 2014 to the present day, we've been campaigning for Helen's Law, Prisoners Disclosure of Victims Information Bill, is what it's formally known as. And we were successful with that. But despite that campaigning, I'm still fighting. So my grandfather is due to be released very, very soon, which provoked me to certainly speak out a little bit more. And I guess for a little bit of self-healing more than anything, it's sort of, coming to recognise and accept, what exactly am I going through, but also more importantly, to look at the positive, look at the future in terms of saying, okay, then well, we've got to break the cycle. It goes back to Henley. It goes back to my son. I've got to break the cycle for him. And, we've got to recognise that something in our family isn't going to change, but at the same time, it can be influenced. And I believe that we all have a purpose. And my purpose is certainly to hopefully change our family fortune going forward. And I believe that, Henley was a fresh start for me. So my son was very much a blank canvas. It was an opportunity which we had two choices we could do with. We either mirror and keep on making the same mistakes as we have done in history, or we recognise that we've got an innocent young life here and an opportunity to really create something which could be quite special, given some of my life experiences. So I'm hoping that all of his family members have made the mistakes that Henry hopefully won't make. And I can share that experience with you. And I think that, in terms of being a father, it's daunting. It's absolutely scary, especially for dads. Mums, easy. Like, you've got loads of support networks, genuinely, all the way through the birth. It's all about mum, baby, and dad's sort of neglected. So, dad for me was, I didn't know how to be a father, being completely frank. I love my dad. My dad's still around. I love him to pieces, but even he'll be the first one to accept that he probably wasn't the best father in the world, but likewise, nor was his dad. So I'm trying to be the best dad, whether it's, taking Henry to the park at the weekend. We were out at the local airport, and Henry was very fortunate to be able to sit in a few planes, it's the small things that I try and do with him, and spend a little bit of quality time with him. But also, as he grows and he gets a little bit older, so I want to be able to, to teach him. I want to be able to show him. But the best way to show someone is through proof of concepts, through leadership, true leadership, not just do as I say, not as I do. So it's through actually practicing what you say to them, and really leading from the front, and him looking up to me to aspire to be someone that he, in his eyes, and others in their eyes, perceive to be someone of a good character. And that's where we're at now, right? So, through all of the mistakes and, through all of the learning experiences that I've gone through, that I'll be sharing in due course. One thing I really want you to sort of pull out of all of this positive side of things is there's going to be some pretty awkward conversations, to be had. And I think that for me, it's not necessarily about looking at the negatives and thinking to yourself, oh wow, this is really bad. It's about looking at the positives and saying, okay, then well, how did we go from where we were to where we are now, and where we continue to go. And it's been pretty amazing journey, to be honest with you. There's very few people out there that have gone through the challenges that I have, that are now sat in the situation that I'm now sat in. And whilst I'm not as the police said the other day, a police officer said the other day, no, I don't envy you for your life. There's many people out there that would envy me, genuinely. And I'm very fortunate these days, very fortunate. I feel very humbled to be in the situation that I'm in. Compared to most, life could be a lot worse, trust me. So I think that, in terms of some of those, those points, I'll be elaborating a little bit further. But in a nutshell, that's a little bit about my background, a little bit about where I come from, and what's provoked me to get to speak to you today.